Why don't we start off by letting Angela introduce herself? Angela, do you want to say hello to everybody?
Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in. It's a pleasure to be here. I always love these panels. A little bit about me. I'm the top selling agent in all of Northern Westchester, and I'm the top 4 in the county. I think that's out of about 9 or 10,000 brokers.
Wow.
The other 3 are in Lower Westchester. So I feel very lucky. This is my second career. I came from the corporate world, so I'm very data oriented. And I pride myself on taking very good care of my clients. I love where I live. My family came from Manhattan. My husband and I had our little girls in Manhattan. This was our weekend house, and then we moved here full time. So Northern Westchester has a wide variety of houses, from condos to homes 30-40 million dollars. And myself and my team handle sort of the gamut of those homes. We tend to be here a little bit less suburban, a little bit more country, a little bit, we consider ourselves sophisticated. Most people came from Manhattan. It's not the sort of a cookie cutter little suburb. We are farther from the city. We do have a good portion of our market is a weekend market, second homes. And we have a lot of trees and nature and amenities, pool, tennis, hiking, culture, restaurants, bars, that sort of thing.
Thank you for letting us visualize the neighborhoods, literally. Brian Scott Cohen, he's a very experienced mortgage broker, and I'd love you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for having me. Josh kind of said it all. I'm a mortgage guy, so I am here to help you borrow some money to buy a house in Westchester or anywhere else, but we'll talk about Westchester today. I've been in the business for 18 years. I grew up in Westchester, and then I've lived in one of the 5 boroughs for the last 20 years. Love real estate, love lending money, and excited to hopefully answer some questions for you guys today, help you qualify to buy a home in Westchester is the goal. And that's about it.
Thank you so much. Before I introduce Peter, who's right on cue, I just wanted to let everyone know that this is a really experienced panel, and they're going to share a lot of information with you, but they're here also to answer your questions. We're going to be sending out a link to this webinar as well as their contact information. So if you have questions that you think are confidential, you'll be able to reach out to them after with the contact information we provide. But you could also ask questions down below in Zoom in the bottom bar with the Q&A and the chat functionality. We're going to be covering a lot of things, but any questions or any things that you want to get answered, feel free to go ahead and use that Q&A and use that chat. With that, Peter, do you want to just say hello and introduce yourself?
Yeah, I hope you can hear me, guys.
Yes, we hear you fine.
Sorry about the technical hitch there. I think we're getting back online soon, so this is my cell phone. Apologies for that. My name's Peter Topping. I work with the Coldwell Banker Global Luxury Office over in Rye on the Sam Shore. My background is initially was in pharmaceuticals for 27 years in compliance before I did something completely different, which was jumped into sales in the real estate business, which I absolutely love. I actually found something I love after 27 years. I've been in the US since 2006. You can probably tell that I'm not from here. I'm the token Brit today, so I'm from England, the north of England, near Manchester. I've actually bought and sold 10 homes myself in 4 different countries.
Wow.
And helped hundreds of people move to Westchester in the last 9 years.
I think we're having some technical difficulties with you, Peter.
What do I do? Well, research. Do you want me to hear me now?
Yeah, I think we should try to get you a better connection on Wi-Fi. And while you do that, I'm going to go over to Angela. I think that would be the best thing to do in the meantime, so that way everybody could hear what you have to say. So Angela, I'm going to come back to you. As you mentioned, and as a lot of people know, you're really among the top Westchester agents for closed sale volume. You have a background in banking and deal making, you mentioned, and have helped clients find everything from starter homes to luxury homes. How can a home hunter get started? And can you give us an overview of the home buying process in Westchester particularly?
I would be happy to do that. So to answer the first question, how can a home buyer get started? The best way for any home buyer to get started is to call Brian Scott Cohen, truthfully, because until a home buyer has a good sense of where they're at financially, because one of the first questions I'm going to ask only so that I can service the client best is give me a sense of your price range. You need to be between 6 and 800,000. Are you between 3.5 and 4 million? And the only person who can really help you understand that the best is Brian and his team. So that's the best way to start. And he can give you a good sense of rates and where they are and where they're going and what's your best bet. Are you going to be in your home for a couple of years? Are you planning to be in your home for 15 years? So everything starts with Brian. And then after that, you come to me. And it's very simple. We try and make this easy and we try and make it fun. It doesn't have to be miserable. So I'll just ask you a very few questions. What do you like? Do you like a lot of land? Do you like a little bit of land? Do you need a 3-bedroom house or do you need a 7-bedroom house? Is pool and tennis critical to you? Do you need to be near the train? Where are you going to be working all day? Are you going to have a home office? Do you have to commute 5 days a week? If you have to commute 5 days a week, we know we have to keep you closer to the train. If that's not an issue, we can spread out a little bit. Tell us about your family and do you have children? Do you not? Are you multi-generational? So those are all some just basic questions. And what do you like? Do you like an antique? Do you like a super modern pool house? So those are sort of the ways that we start. And then we listen very, very carefully. We try and not waste anybody's time. And we try and really focus because we know the market, because we know every house on every street in the area we service, we can cut your work down by 90%. I will say to a client, yes, I know that picture looks pretty. There's a cliff in the back, or it's all wetlands, or, you're on the highway is right behind you. So if those things are deal killers, they know not to waste time. So I hope that gives you a little view to how we get started.
That was great.
Okay.
Peter, I'm coming back to you. The last I heard was that you bought a lot of homes in a lot of countries.
Yeah, I was saying, I bought 10 homes in 4 different countries and helped hundreds of buyers here since I arrived in 2006. Originally from the UK via Switzerland. And I started in a boutique company, a small company, spent a couple of times there, flipped over to Coldwell Banker on the Sun Shore. Another amazing company in Westchester. We cover the whole of Westchester and beyond, of course. And I actually found something I love. I guess my goal is to take the stress out of buying a home, make it as simple as possible. It is a stressful process. And, to call a home buyer in a year's time and find out he loves the home that he bought, that's my success.
And then, Peter, will you just mention again for everyone the communities that you are focused on?
Well, I work in the Rye office, but I live in Mamaroneck, which is on the South Shore. I do cover the whole of Westchester. I bought a Tesla, free charging, and I travel everywhere. So whether it's the Bronx, the river towns, close to Greenwich, or as far up as Ossining, Katona, Bedford, it doesn't really matter where it is. I'll go to wherever a buyer needs to look.
Terrific. Well, let's go to Brian. As Angela said, he's the first man you want to talk to. And, how much money you can spend is a small detail you want to get straightened out. And I'm sure also with the fluctuations of mortgage rates, like what people can afford has varied. But Brian's had 17 years of mortgage experience and is ranked as one of the country's leading mortgage professionals by industry publications. So Brian, can you give us an overview of the mortgage options and really the process for financing a home purchase in Westchester?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of options. I think options is, next to Scott, it's my third name. It's, we have a lot of options for clients, right? It's super important that, every client is different, right? Some clients are putting down 50%, some may need 10%. I think it's kind of, for everybody on the call, it should be your first step. I get a lot of calls from real estate agents where they're working Sundays and nights showing apartments and clients. That's my dog. Sorry, his name's Mickey. I think it's super important in the process getting the dog. Sorry. Come here, bud.
We're still in the Zoom world, everybody. You know, it has its benefits, as we all know, and downsides. That's a cute dog.
So he does mortgages also. He comes to work with me every day. So I'm just trying to get him to be quiet. Sorry. So what I would tell you is the first step in the process. You want to make sure that you talk to a mortgage professional and someone who's local is the bottom line. There's a lot of online lenders with no New York presence. They don't understand, closing costs, time frame, and what it takes, right? New York is very unique, has different closing costs than if you're buying in New Jersey. And I think that the more communication you have with your team, right? Have your real estate agent, have Angela, have Peter, have Brian, have your team put together so they can all communicate to make sure you're looking what's affordable for you, right? Because pictures are pictures. Like Angela said, there may be a cliff behind there also, right? They may have a tax abatement that's expiring in a week. It looks great online, but all of a sudden it might have a tax abatement and your taxes are going to shoot up. So communication is key. To talk to me, it's free, and we get people pre-approved same day. It's a painless process and just kind of help people, get a reality. I get calls all the time and it's, Brian, what's your rate? And I'm like, where are you buying, right? Like everyone's credit score is different. Everyone's situation is different. The bottom line is, for the people that are on here, it's a phone call, it's free. Find out what you can afford and talk to the experts, right? Talk to Angela, talk to Peter and say, hey, talk to Brian. He said, I can borrow this and I have this to put down. Show me the houses. And it's really that easy to get started.
Well, I know Angela spoke highly of you, and I really have to give credit to Brian also because he helped my mother get a mortgage, and it was terrific to work with you, and you really know your stuff. Angela, let's go back to you. Let's talk about a home hunter who may be considering moving from New York City to Westchester. And you touched on this a little bit, but what should they know about the lifestyle, the community, amenities, and real estate values in the area?
So Westchester County is a very big place with a lot of diverse communities. So I think the first thing that we want to match the buyer with the right community, right? So if you're looking for walkability, that's one thing. If you're looking for a lot of nature, if you're looking for amenities, as I mentioned, we do have a varied and again, a very sophisticated community. So it's all about the taste and the most important things. Is it a particular school? Is it a particular, tennis club or a country club or a hiking trail? So I think those sort of things we work very carefully to match. The other thing I can't stress enough, the reason why you want to work with a broker and a top broker in that area is because there's a lot of things that are happening off market right now. We're in a rapid market. There's a lot of buyer demand. There's limited inventory. So it's only when you're working with a broker who really knows their stuff, who has the inside scoop, that you're going to get the best deal and the most preferred properties. There are properties that again look so pretty. They're, underneath the hood, they're not so pretty. And then there are things that might look not great, but they're sort of latent jewels. So if I sort of say to somebody, let's look at this house. No, Angela, I hate that kitchen. Well, maybe with a little paint, with a different backsplash, so we can uncover jewels. So I think we have to listen very carefully and match that buyer with really ultimately what they're looking for.
I love what you said earlier about like knowing all the different properties in your geographic area, because I think that's a really big part of the search is like knowing when things are coming available, what might be coming available on the market.
I mean, your value is not to be sort of a ticket taker to show properties. It's to know the properties inside and out and what's going on that street. Yeah, maybe this house looks amazing for $900,000. Maybe every other house on the street is $600,000. So do you want to buy the most expensive house? Then put a lot of, there's a lot of nuance that I think is important. It's about people's asset, their money, it's a pretty big decision.
Sure. It's one of their biggest investments you'll make in your lives, for sure. I just want to remind a bunch of people have joined since the beginning that you can use the Q&A in the chat at the bottom if you have questions that you want to ask. Let's go over to Peter. Peter, you talked about, your years of experience in the corporate world, having lived abroad and having a special expertise in moving and relocating from abroad or even locally. So I guess the first question for you is one you frequently hear from your clients. Why are there so few listings? And related, how can a family moving from Brooklyn or elsewhere in New York City find something that works for them and their lifestyle and is also in their budget?
Yeah, I guess that's the question on the tip of everybody's tongue at the moment. You know, what's happened to the inventory? It used to be location, location, location. Now it's inventory, inventory, inventory. We got to look back to 2020, 2021 to, you know, look at the answer to that and look at the environment that we're in. We had a lot of people move out of the city, out of Brooklyn, snapping up homes because of the pandemic. Very low mortgage interest rates. And, you know, an environment where sellers were a little uncertain as to where they were going to go, because this isn't just a Westchester issue, it's a national issue. So, you know, I might want to sell my house and move to Florida, but when I look at Florida, there's only 3 homes for sale in the town that I want to be in. So I'd say it's getting a little better. You know, I've seen a lot of homes coming on the market in the last few weeks. Buyer demand has dropped a little bit. April was the lowest amount of sales since the pandemic. So I guess what I'd say is, if you're a buyer, don't despair. There are ways of getting around this. For sure, I would work with a good realtor, somebody that knows the market, someone that knows the houses. Please get yourself pre-approved before we do that. I can't stress that enough. And that's not just to understand your buying power, but a lot of sellers are now asking for pre-approvals just to get through the door. And, you know, I see a lot of buyers using tools like Zillow, which is a great tool in itself, but there are a lot of inaccuracies with tools like that. So, you know, call your realtor, get yourself set up with a private search, personalized to you as an individual, and then we can send you the homes that are live and the ones that match you and your family's taste.
I think that's a good point, considering Zillow lost a few $100 million trying to auto buy homes based on their own valuations, right? So we know that you need a great broker that knows what they're doing.
Yeah, they didn't quite get that right.
Brian, let's go to you and ask the question that so many people ask. What are mortgage rates and lending requirements for homes now in Westchester?
Yeah, I think that, you know, lending requirements are pretty similar across the board. I think in Westchester, it's important that we get an idea of where in Westchester you're looking, right? Are you in a flood zone? Are you not in a flood zone? What are the taxes? Are they based? Is it new construction? Is it not, right? So there's a lot of factors that go into it. But when we work with clients, you know, they have an idea of what they're looking at, which is super helpful. But, you know, when we do, you know, interest rates move every day. I mean, right, the stock market went down 1,000 points yesterday. One day I talked to someone and the rates are X, and then the next day they're different, right? So they keep moving. Since we're recording this, you know, I can tell you what a rate is this second, and you're gonna watch it tomorrow, and you'll be like, oh, his rate's lower than everyone or higher than everybody. So, you know, the market rates right now are in the high 4s, low 5s on fixed rates. Low 4s, maybe high 3s on some adjustables, and everyone's situation is different, right? There's so many programs out there based on credit score, based on down payment, based on length of the loan, based on property type, based on if you can move assets to a certain lender. So there's so many different options. But what I always tell people is focus on your monthly payment, right? A rate is a number, it's great. But when you're amortizing something over 30 years, if you're buying a property and you find something you love and you're $50,000 apart, it's $200 a month, right? That's, you know, that's what it comes out to. Don't have Starbucks for a month or whatever it may be, right? It's a cell phone bill. So I really focus on payment versus the, oh my God, rates are changing. Because everybody on this call, not the panel, but the, you know, 50, 60 people that I see that are participants, every one of you have a parent, a brother, sister, a story when rates were 6% or 18%. And you know what, that was good at the time. So it's all about setting the new kind of norm for rates and just move forward. That's the way I look at it.
What about closing costs? Can you give some expectations in terms of that?
Yeah, so I think it depends, right? So I think it depends on where you're buying. I always tell people, you know, people always say, oh, Brian, you know, I want to borrow, you know, this amount of money. And a lot of times people don't understand you need to have separate money usually for closing costs. So as a buyer, you need a down payment. You know, we do have programs with no down payments, believe it or not, VA loans, and we have 3% down programs. And I can talk and bore you all day, which is why, you know, I encourage anybody who's thinking about it that think they may not qualify, contact us, right? Because you don't know. There's so many different programs out there. Closing costs will range. So depending on the county in Westchester, some have, Yonkers has a different recording tax than, say, Mount Kisco. There's different closing costs. But in general, I would say you want to have usually 3 to 4% of the purchase price, I would say, depending on the price, right? So the higher you go, there's mansion tax and other costs that kick in. But I would say 3 to 4% of the price is a good rough estimate of what you need to be prepared for closing costs. And then we want you to have some money after closing, right? Furniture right now is not cheap. Is the bottom line, movers, expenses, and sometimes you buy a home and there's some things that pop up. So I would tell you, have a cushion, be comfortable is the bottom line.
Good advice. Angela, what do you recommend in terms of buyers becoming more educated about the market and pricing?
So the only way to understand pricing is to get out there and ask a lot of questions, look at properties. So once a buyer is pre-approved and they are really ready to start their search, we will pick out, they'll tell us exactly what we want. And we'll pick out a few houses. We don't have massive inventory around anymore. We'll pick out the best values for what they want. And we'll just start, it could be a fun process. You just start looking at a few houses. And, we have a lot of expertise that we share with our clients. Here's the data. This is why this is a great value. And by the same token, I will tell somebody, hold off on that house. It is overpriced. It is not going to trade right now. Maybe when it comes down, we'll look. I just sent a note to a client 15 minutes before this. Okay, this just got a price drop down to below $3 million. Come this weekend. It'll transact this weekend. Come now. So you have to know where the values are, and you impart that, and then you provide that backup with hard data.
And talk a little bit more about the role that data should play in the process of buying.
In terms of being educated?
Yeah, and in terms of making bids or valuations, or knowing if something is overpriced or underpriced.
Well, that's a conversation. If you have a good amount of trust in your broker, and you should go to somebody who's got a clean, pristine reputation, that has reviews, that has the backup to show why they're a top broker. Presumably you're going to rely on to some extent, their advice, just as you would a sort of a top doctor. So you learn the market, you understand what the comps are, why this one traded at 870 and why this one's going to go at 925. You make a value judgment where you're willing to go and how you'll feel if you lose it for a few dollars. It comes down to exactly what Brian said. It comes down to the monthly nut, your taxes, sort of your maintenance, and your mortgage. So once you have that figured out, you'll start to understand the relative value of properties.
Peter, let's talk about the selling a property when you're looking to buy a property. A lot of people are in that situation. If a buyer's looking to sell a property in New York City or anywhere else for that matter, and then buy in Westchester, what kind of timing and process do you recommend?
Yeah, I just noticed somebody in the chat Q&A asked that question about, should I sell first? Never been able to do a deal from somebody that's not selling and selling and then trying to buy at the same time, unless they have the cash. Most of us don't. If you're going to sell, get into contract first before you start looking. Highly unlikely that any seller in this market wants to get into a deal with someone who says, well, I got to go sell my house now. It's just not happening. So do your research, link yourself with a good realtor, and start the process. 4 times in the last 9 years, I've actually sold the first house we saw. That is not typical. Buyers are looking at 10, 20 different homes. Some people may decide to buy a home in a few weeks. Sometimes it takes 6 months or even longer. So find a realtor who's got patience. I often refer to myself as that's my middle name. Because you can't rush this process. It's the most expensive thing that we're going to do, and time should be taken. And budget your time to look. It's not easy when you've got a family, especially, to spend all day Saturday looking at homes, and people get tired. So don't underestimate the process of looking for a home. Once we find something, we're making an offer. Hopefully we win, sometimes we don't. And then we get into a contract where we need a lawyer, and before that, we're doing a home inspection. It's very important that you understand what you buy, good and bad, and learn about the home at the same time. How long does it take? Well, once we find something to get into contract, about a week if you're on the ball, sometimes two. Faster we do that, the quicker we prevent somebody else from stealing the home from us, especially in this market. Financing, I mean, Brian might disagree, but on the whole, it takes 30 to 45 days to close a home, not because of the mortgage company, because of everything else that goes around it, getting municipalities to give the information we need, getting a survey, closing permits that might be open on the house. So I think it depends on the buyer. Sometimes we can buy in a month if it's a cash deal. Sometimes it takes 3 or 4 months to close that process down. Once we got a deal, once we got our bank approval, the last thing we do is a final walk through the home. We take the buyer back to the home and check everything out before we close. And then that's the happiest day of everybody's life because you pick up the keys. So it can be short if we're cash, a little longer if we're getting along. All depends on the buyer's urgency and their need. And to be honest, how picky they are, because as Angela said, the inventory is pretty low, so you have to be patient.
And
Well,
aggressive.
Sorry?
And I said, and aggressive.
Absolutely, yeah. I think in this market, we should tell people that you have to be strong and you have to be aggressive. And that's not just with your money, it's also with the terms and conditions that we write on an offer.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of competition, has been a lot of competition, so just be prepared for a bit of a fight when you find the right house.
Brian, let's go back to you on financing. Can you give some insight into selling, buying, and relocating from a financing perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to come down to personal financials, right? I mean, we can look at, all aspects with the buyer. Do they need to sell to buy? Do we have programs where we can leverage their existing property by bridge loans against their property they may be selling to get access to assets. We can also do lower down payment on the purchase, and after they sell, they can do something called a recast, and they can then lower their payment. So there's definitely options, but what also comes into play is, will your offer get accepted, right? That's the bottom line. So I may have a creative option where we can do 5%. But if there's 2 offers on the property and you're putting in 5% and someone else is putting down 30%, not equal, right? So I think we have great financing options for the solution, but the buyer has to be qualified at the same time, right? Or they need to be comfortable waiving their mortgage contingency and taking the risk of, hey, am I going to sell first? And that mortgage contingency conversation could be a whole nother panel, but we can explain that another time. But basically, there's definitely options is the bottom line.
What about back to the question of what is advisable when it comes to either selling, renting, and then buying versus selling and buying simultaneously or back to back? What's your recommendation on that?
Oh, so me, I'm biased. I'm a very believer if you can do it now, right? I mean, we've seen it. I mean, I talk to people every day and like, the rates were 2.8 4 months. They were. Where were you 4 months ago, right? So what was, right? I think, like Angela and Peter said, there's low inventory, right? Low inventory means that there is more demand than there's supply. If you find something you like and you can do it. That's, always my advice. And, everybody's different. It's got to come down to their personal situation, what they have going on. But my goal is to get them approved, get them the money, they make the decision.
Peter, you walked us through the process pretty well. I don't know if there's anything else you want to share in terms of other professionals involved with the home purchase, from the lawyer, home inspector, title company, and renovation.
Yeah, sure. Other than getting yourself a good realtor after you get a good mortgage approval from Brian, there's a lot of people involved. I touched on the home inspection team. Highly important that we understand what we're buying and the good and bad. It is not just a home inspector, there are also specialist inspectors. If you're buying a home maybe up in Angela's neck of the woods where you maybe a septic tank or a well, you might want to get those inspected. There's obviously your attorney. We're in an attorney state, so every deal needs to have an attorney on the buy and the sell side. Most attorneys have a favorite title company. I have a favorite title company. They all do basically the same thing, protecting the buyer from hidden issues when they buy the home, like a lien on the home, or does that person actually truly own the home? Let's just make sure. And that's why we pay for title insurance. You might need a survey. The home might be quite old. No one's done a survey on the property to actually determine where the boundary lines are or if there are any issues with that. So you might need a surveyor. And then once we bought the home, minor renovation, a handyman, a contractor, a landscaper. Most of the real estate companies, if not all, have what we call a concierge list that has many options for each of these services and beyond. So just come back to your realtor and ask for a list of recommendations. And we've all got our own personal recommendations from our experiences.
And I see someone on here asked, how do you know if you're in a flood zone or if it has flooding problems or it has roaches or rodents? I mean, I guess a lot of that would come down to making sure you have a proper home inspection, I would assume.
Sure. Well, if you're in a flood zone, FEMA issue flood maps. We can quite easily pull up any home and check whether that home is in a flood zone, whether it needs flood insurance or not. But the latest storm that we had, a lot of people who didn't have flood insurance still got flooded, but that was more of a one-off issue. So a lot of buyers don't like buying in a flood zone. It doesn't necessarily mean the home's going to flood. A section of the garden may flood occasionally. So, it's not as drastic as it might sound.
I don't know if, Angela, you want to speak to another question here about areas for investment opportunities.
So it's a great question. So like any market, there are investment opportunities. We talked about a little earlier about uncovered jewels. There might be a house that, hasn't been renovated or hasn't been painted in years and just looks terrible. Sometimes those are the best values. If they, if you could just do a little bit of this or that, you'll create value and be able to flip it out or enjoy a home that you might not have been able to afford if it were all done. So there are still hidden values in this market. You just need a team who can sniff those out and who knows they're coming before they hit the market.
Brian, there's a lot of questions in here about financing someone moving from abroad with no credit history, someone who's a first-time buyer, someone who may have gone through a bankruptcy. What do you talk to those people, or what can you say to those people when they're saying, can I get financing? What impact does it have on my rates?
Yeah, so everybody's situation is different. Everyone's rate is different, right? I get it all the time. Like, oh, I saw this rate on this website. I'm like, that's great. Do you see the 3 paragraphs below it that say X credit score, X amount of points, right? People advertise the prettiest things, right? You want to advertise. No one's going to advertise the highest rate because you're not going to get the calls, right? So, I think that there are options for most of those scenarios, right? I mean, one of the, where I work, we have options, right? I'm not just one, I represent multiple lenders. So we look at the whole market. It's not that I work at a single bank where it's like, oh, we don't have it. When I search, I'm looking at like 40 different options and investors, which is a big leg up in the market because everyone has unique situations, be it a bankruptcy, be it coming from overseas. I mean, we have foreign national programs. We have light doc and no doc programs. So I think there's a lot of programs for it, but the greater the risk, the greater the rate. That's the bottom line, right? So, I tell people don't expect to see, the rate that you're going on abcbank.com if your scenario is not that exact scenario. If you're a foreign investment, if it's investment property versus primary property, if you're putting down 5% versus 50%, it's different. But again, payment, focus on your payment, especially it's the most important thing. Forget the rate, right? The rate's the rate. Focus on your payment. And if it's an investment property, hey, will it cash flow for you? What's your mortgage deduction? What's your tax deduction? There's so many other things to look at when you're, finding out about it. But for all the questions that people have it, Josh is going to send out contact information. Just shoot me an email, call me, text me, whatever works for you in this modern world. Just give a shout, and I can promise you we can get you an answer within 24 hours, and most likely sooner.
And it sounds like it's a very one-on-one personal, examination of people's standing to be able to figure out what is the best deal for them or how it has to be structured.
Yes.
Let's talk about financing for renovations, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that when they buy a home, there's renovations that they're going to want to make. Are there any special situations buyers should watch out for that could affect financing, such as like a buried oil tank?
Yeah, so I mean, habitability is key, right? So we want to make sure that the property one is habitable. So it needs to have a working kitchen, right? So you need to be able to cook, you need to be able to sleep, you need to be able to have water. So these are important things. But, and but's the big word, there are renovation loans that we have that you don't need any of that, right? But again, renovation loans are different meaning rates are different, process is different, costs are different. So I think it's, communication is going to be the key. You're going to talk to Peter and Angela and say, hey, they're going to call me and say, hey, Brian, by the way, there's an open permit, no water, the utilities are off. And I'm going to say, okay, we need to do this kind of loan, or this is what we need to do, right? That's where it's super important that communication is key, that you relay this information, because a lot of times as buyers, I get part of it, Angela gets part of it, Peter gets another piece, and we got to try and figure out together. And sometimes the more we know up front, the easier it is to kind of go through these obstacles versus, hiding something or not telling me about an oil tank and the appraiser goes there and there's a crane in the front yard. It's happened. Like it's happened. So just communicates the bottom line.
Angela, what tips can you give home hunters in Westchester in terms of how it's different from New York City? I mean, I have to imagine taxes is at the top. People can't forget that when you live in New York City, you're paying those city taxes, commuting costs, septic taxes, tanks. Just what other things do people have to keep in mind when they're going from, the city to Westchester?
I think it's a very good question. A lot of young people coming out of the city. We have a lot of city buyers here, young city buyers. We have a lot of weekend buyers. We have a lot of people coming out of Brooklyn. So you get a lot more for your money than the city, right? You get space, you get property, you get yard. So that's a good thing. Our taxes in Westchester are not inconsequential. Our taxes tend to be high. Do we like it? We don't like it. But here's the story. If you're going to live 30 minutes out of the city or 60 minutes out of the city, and you want amenities, you want culture, you want outdoor space, you want, the town pool or a country club, you want it to look like this and feel like this, and you want to be able to send your children to public school, whereas, that's an option here. We've got lots of private schools as well. Well, yeah, you've got to pay those taxes. We don't know of another place that looks like this, that feels like this, that lives like this, that has lower taxes. So yeah, you have to be prepared for those taxes.
So it sounds like there's upsides and downsides in different respects.
Like everything else in life.
Right. There's one question here that I think is good to answer both for Angela and Peter, is whether or not there's co-ops and condos.
Yes, there's certainly both co-ops and condos throughout the county. And I know Peter sells the wide gamut of properties, as do I.
Yeah, especially lower Westchester, we have a lot of co-ops for sale, and it's a great way to get on the housing ladder. As is a condo, a lot of people are downsizing to condos. It's easier living, and co-ops are good for a starter home. A lot of young people buying a co-op and then either keeping it to rent or selling it and moving on to something bigger later on.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, I live in an apartment building, and it's it's convenient when you have Amazon deliveries every day, having that doorman or having that safe space for it.
All we need is a porch here,
Right,
Josh,
there you go.
and you can get your Amazon deliveries here too.
That's right. There's not as many people walking around. I don't have to worry
There
about
are not.
as much, right? Peter, let's talk about transportation, because obviously people are starting to get back to commuting. Some people have been commuting the entire time. Talk a little bit about, can people find homes that are close to transportation, and really what transportation options there are?
Well, I think we've got great connectivity in Westchester. We've got 3 great train lines that run along the Hudson River down the center. We've got the Haven line, Hudson line, And Metro North is great for commuters. Obviously, the further up the line you go, I think you're probably going to get larger property, bigger home. It's a trade-off. I used to live up in the Katona area, an hour into Manhattan. It can be a little strange sometimes, but once you get used to it, you're going to get more land and a bigger home for your money. In the main, the closer we are to the city, the closer we are to the rail station and the village or the town that you live in, the smaller property we get and the price tends to increase. We've got major highways, major train connectivity. The one big difference is you've probably got to buy a car. A lot of people who live in the city don't have a vehicle. You might even need two. Lease or buy, that's the biggest change for a lot of people leaving Manhattan or Brooklyn, that they actually start to drive and maybe even have to take a driving license test. But I think that on the whole, a lot of my buyers want to be close to transport. They also want to be close to the village, walk to a coffee shop, walk to a restaurant. So it's a trade-off. Some buyers have even bought further out and got Uber to the train station in the morning, don't even get in their car. So, it's whatever suits your lifestyle. I think the younger generation like to be close to trains, like to be close to the village, and sometimes those homes are harder to find because we just don't have the inventory for it. But
Brian,
I
you're saying
think
something?
on the whole, we have we have good connectivity and it's a great place to live, great place to raise a family. So if you are doing an hour on the train in the morning, then I think it's worth it. It's a great place to grow up.
Well, this was a terrific conversation, and I want to remind everyone that we will be sending out their contact information. We weren't able to get to all the questions, but a lot of you have personalized questions that they will be happy to answer. So I really want to thank our sponsors and panelists, Brian Scott Cohen from GR Affinity, Angela Kessel, and Peter Topping. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Josh.
guys.
Great job.
Thank you, guys. Have a great
Thanks for
afternoon.
being by.
Take care.